few stories came out. One of them is NATO ships. So let's go through the one with NATO ships on page 5. NATO sends ships, fighter jets to Eastern Europe as Russia tensions simmer. This is a political story. NATO announced on Monday that European allies were deploying added ships and fighter jets to Eastern Europe and putting new forces on standby in response to Russia's continued military mobilization along the Ukrainian border. NATO's announcement comes amid reports that senior Pentagon officials on Saturday presented U.S. President Biden with options for adopting a more aggressive posture towards Russia that would include deploying additional military forces and equipment to Eastern Europe. While Ukraine is not an ally, NATO countries have threatened severe sanctions in response to any attack, and Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said that the alliance will move quickly and forcefully to protect its members, including the small Baltic nations, under Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause in the NATO Treaty. How concerned are you with what's going on over there right now?
I mean, it's obviously alarming, and I would just point out, like, it's remarkable how Russia annexed part of Ukraine, Crimean Peninsula, under Obama. Biden was vice president. He was the point guy on Ukraine. He visited 17 times, I think, during his vice presidency. Then Trump gets into office. Then for 4 years, we didn't have any more incursions into Ukraine. Putin was not pushing. I mean, they kept the Crimea, but they weren't like trying to gain more ground. Now, suddenly, a year after Biden takes office, Putin is back. And he is, I mean, by all accounts, like, he is serious. He does want to make this incursion, whether it's like a conventional invasion, I don't know. But there are other things that can be done that are acts of war, like hybrid war, sending in, like they did with Crimea, like unmarked troops, basically cyber attacks, like different types of things they can do to Ukraine. And so the question is, like, why does the aggression surge under Obama and Biden, but not under Trump, you know? And I think, you know, one of those 3 presidents was called a Russian agent. So I think it's just absurd when you look at it. The 2 presidents where Russia has gained power were both Democrats, right? And like Trump, the one that they made up all these Russia stories about, was one where during his presidency, Ukraine was in a safer position by far than it is now. Now, going to NATO, I mean, so NATO, it's interesting because what Trump said about NATO when he was first running for president was that they need to pay their fair share. There are a lot of countries in NATO that do not pay the 2% of the GDP towards defense, which is required by the alliance. And he was right, frankly. We see Germany, for example, they don't pay that 2%, and they rely on Russia for natural gas for their population. And so it's like they have a lot of dealings with Russia that makes them unable to or unwilling to come to the defense of an ally. Ukraine is not a NATO ally, though. So like if Russia invades Ukraine, it doesn't trigger that Article 5, which is like means collective defense, that all the NATO allies have to come to their defense. It doesn't mean that nobody will. It just means it's not required by the treaty. So.
Yeah, now the Daily Wire came out saying Biden slammed over reports he can't evacuate U.S. citizens out of Ukraine. Criminally incompetent. New reports indicate that the Biden administration has ordered families of all American personnel at U.S. Embassy in Ukraine to immediately leave the country. He's warned U.S. citizens in the country that will be unable to evacuate and is considering sending U.S. military forces to Eastern Europe. Given that the president has said military actions by Russia could come out at any time, the U.S. government will not be in position to evacuate U.S. citizens. Biden's State Department said so, and so U.S. citizens currently present in Ukraine should plan accordingly. What does this really mean? Because the continue to say Monica Crowley, former Trump official, says Biden-Harris still cool with abandoning Americans in war zones. Holy crap, it's August all over again.
I mean, frankly, that was my first reaction when I saw this too, because we all remember what happened in Afghanistan, this horrible tragedy that happened a few months ago in summer, when Americans were stranded, when hundreds, I mean, we don't even know how many Afghan civilians were killed at that airport bombing. We lost 13 American service members at that bombing. And so these images and what we saw there during this botched and just horrific withdrawal from Afghanistan that was botched in every way, this is all, it's fresh in our minds. So when we hear the same types of rhetoric coming out, like that Americans need to leave, you can arrange your own transportation out of Ukraine, that does bring back deja vu. It brings back that very traumatic memory recently of what happened in Afghanistan. And, I truly hope, like, Ukraine is different from Afghanistan. I truly hope we don't see a repeat of what we saw over there. But it is worrisome that it seems like Biden has left Putin in the driver's seat.
So if you enjoyed this little short segment from the podcast that we did, here's another short segment to watch. Or if you want to see the entire podcast, click over here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.